Hey, Parisi Nation, this is Steve Leo. I'm your host. Again, I am lucky to have Stan Skolfield on. Stan has been around the Parisi Network for almost as long as me. He's got a really cool story. I'm going to let him introduce himself up there in Maine. He's going to give us his background, but I really want to talk about his journey in and out of Parisi's, but also how we started out in this business and taking a little bit of a different route to get into the sports performance business. So, Stan, thanks for getting on, and just give us a quick intro, what you do, where you're from, all that fun stuff.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's great to be back, and talking to you. And so my background. So I'm an athletic trainer, strength and conditioning coach. Once I got out of college, my first job out of school was I was working for the Boston Red Sox, and I was a minor league athletic trainer. And back then, strength and conditioning was a brand new thing in the baseball realm. And the Red Sox organization was pretty progressive in, wanting to prevent injuries, and saw that strength and conditioning was a pathway to make that happen. So that really taught me a lot about how to develop athletes. So what they would do with us is they would take, during the regular season, we would just work with the team, do regular workouts. But then the off season, what I did was I went down and worked at our minor league complex. And so working with some of the injured athletes that got hurt or had surgery through the course of the season. But they would also send us guys that had been drafted with goals like, hey, this guy needs to put on 20 pounds in the off season, or this guy needs to get stronger here, or whatever. And so we would test them out, evaluate them, and then either they would stay with us and train with us, or we would send them home with a program, and kind of follow them up throughout the off season. But we were one of the first organizations to run off season workouts. So we started with 15 athletes one season. By the time I left, we were up to 60 or 70 guys would be showing up. It was real strong. And lo and behold, hey, those injury rates went right down during spring training. So I left there and started working with an orthopedic group, doing the classic athletic trainer at the school, but also they wanted me to kind of head up a sports performance program. And we kind of slowly made that grow. We ended up opening up we were the first in the area to open up a 10,000 square foot sports performance center. And as we were doing that, one of the things I knew was this is I know how to train athletes, me myself, but what I didn't know was really how to do it from a business sense. Because back then, and not to date myself, right? Back in the day, there was only a handful of people that were really doing sports performance as a business. Parisi was one of them. Mike Boyle was another. Athletes Performance, or IMG, which is now Exos. And what I knew was I didn't have a system, and I really needed help along the lines of a proven system that kind of worked as it relates to kind of, hey, bringing somebody in, evaluating them, selling a program, and then progressing them through and making them a better athlete. And that's what really kind of, as I researched and I'd go to Perform Better and meet, I met Bill and Martin, and just, we decided to have a partnership there, and we became we were one of the early adopters of the Parisi program. And it was awesome. We, as a Parisi program director for, at least 8 years, maybe more than that. And it was phenomenal. We did a lot. We worked with I worked with you, worked with Eric, worked with, a lot of other folks, and kind of helping to, continue to push the Parisi programming, more along the lines with the strength side of things. But it was awesome. I love that experience. Then in about, when was it? Was it 2019 or fall of 2018? Organization, the orthopedic group I was with, we separated ways. They were not really into the sports performance side of things, and moved on. And then from there, I kind of had to figure out what is it I want to do? Because here I am, I'm not employed anymore. And oh, by the way, my wife left her job of 18 years with a healthcare company too. So, took a few months to kind of really figure out what is it I'm passionate about? Because at that point, working for a large healthcare company, I was doing both the athletic training side and the sports performance side. I was a little kind of burnt out, so to speak, from the administrative end. But it came very clear after talking to people, coaches, friends, that, man, my calling is in this sports performance sector, specifically around baseball, softball. And I said, hey, that's a good idea. When I start up my own business and get back into the sports performance world and call it Skolfield Performance. So, hey, that brings us to present time. Here I am.
That's a lot, all in one, right? That's a lot.
All in one, right there. You like to keep going on and on, but I want to at least take a breath.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, let's talk a little bit about, when you first started out, you were working with pro athletes and, at a pretty young age. So how was that when you first started working with them, and then introducing, we'll say, strength training, right, to professional baseball players, which at the time, right, this is what, early to mid 90s, still working out, like you said, in strength training wasn't that prevalent in Major League Baseball. So how was that experience? Did you meet any resistance along the way? Did some of the players or coaches say, the typical, hey, if you get too strong, you're going to be tight? Did you deal with any of those barriers at all when you first got it going?
Absolutely. Because back then it was like, oh, you don't want to lift weights. It's going to make you tight. It's going to make you throw, you're not going to be as, you're not going to throw as hard. There was a lot of resistance. And one of the things you learned there, unlike working with like high school athletes or even college athletes, where it's like, hey, as the athletic trainer, the strength coach, I told you to do something, they just do it. Right. Yeah. There, it took like those guys, those pro athletes. It's like, I'm not doing that. And they just walk off. Like, you actually have to, reach them. You have to kind of talk to them like, hey, the reason why we're going to do, a lunge and this lower body workout is, and you actually explain to them, like, this is the benefits it's going to have to you. And that's how you begin to kind of create buy-in. And it's really showing them that, you care about them as the person and as well as them as an athlete it's succeeding, versus I'm just telling you what to do. And that was how I began to kind of reach guys, was more from the educational standpoint, and at the same time, it also took a lot in terms of trying to convince coaches. And the biggest way I did that was, the guys you need to pay attention to the most if you're in baseball is your pitching staff, right? Like, those are the guys, that's where the money is. Those are the guys that are usually going to get hurt the most, and usually around the shoulder. So I took it upon myself to kind of befriend some of the pitching coaches and really begin to learn about pitching mechanics and, what is it in the art of throwing? Like, how does all that happen? And really understand the biomechanics. By understanding the biomechanics, then I could kind of explain to them, like, hey, the reason why you want them doing this medicine ball work, or this core work or this mobility flexibility work is because during the delivery, it helps them do X. So it's a lot for, being able to, it's no different than today. It's like, you have to provide some educational component and not just try to shove down people's throat. Like, no, you need to do this. You have to do this. You got to explain to them the whys in order to make the hows kind of happen. So, that's how I kind of did it, and I learned quickly, my first year was like a real education of, hey, this is what's going to take. And then as you gain experience, that's how we were able to kind of get more and more to adoption of our program and more athletes to kind of take part in it, along with, hey, results kind of come with it. And that once guys started seeing results, hey, they're more injury resistant, they're getting faster, they're getting stronger, velo's starting to pick up. That's where you get more and more people to create buy-in.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back then, like you said, the injuries were going down, and probably at the time, injury reduction, mitigating those injuries is probably a big thing, performing a little better. But if you look at now, I'm going to fast forward 25 years, we're in this crazy era where, I mean, every time you put a baseball game, guys are throwing 100 plus.
Right.
It's crazy what's happening. I mean, obviously, in my mind, the training has become a big part of it, right? Between the performance training, the biomechanists, the pitching coaches, all of that stuff, the arm throwing programs, all of that now has really evolved. How do you think that is affecting pitchers now? Even I want to say long term, because in my mind, I feel all that max effort work that they're doing is probably one of the reasons why guys are still getting hurt, even though we know more about strength conditioning than we've ever known, in the past 20 years. So what are your thoughts on kind of what's going on now with all these guys just, crushing the gun every time you watch a baseball game?
And that's exactly it. It's like that's what everybody's looking for. It's that max effort, that max velo. And there's a lot of forces that are on top of it. So not only do you have guys throwing a ton, right? So at a very high level of intensity with long toss and everything else, but you also have the whole weighted ball movement kind of going along with it. Right. So yeah, it definitely, injury rates with that stuff, if you're not careful, like they just skyrocket. And so that's where it becomes real important, whether you're a strength coach, an athletic trainer, physical therapist, if you're working with that population, you got to be very well educated around the shoulder, around, the spine, thoracic spine, and understanding like what to look for and making sure that like there's no major red flags when people are going to begin these programs, looking at things like, shoulder total motion and, and rib position and making sure they have the right mobility in the right areas and the right stability in the right areas before they're even beginning those programs. Because if they do that, right, if they have some of those issues and you don't address them, like it's a fast track for them getting hurt. And I think a lot of that gets missed. You've got a lot of programs out there that, and I'm not saying like I know anything about anything, but what I'm saying is like there's a lot of programs over there that, the only thing they care about is the result, right? So it's like, oh, you want to start throwing harder? Okay, here's the driveline program. Let's just go get after it without clearing some of these other areas or making sure that their foundation, right, is complete and available for them to be able to put that level of load and intensity on. And it's, unfortunately, and with your higher level guys, the guys that are throwing hard, again, it's that classic example, like guys throwing hard, like leave them alone, just give him some more, but don't change his mechanics. Don't give him weight training. Don't have him do any of this other stuff because, he's already got it. And typically, again, they're the guys that throw hard. They throw the most. They have the most volume on their arm. They accumulate the most stress. And unless you address some of that stuff, that's where your injuries begin to really kind of pile up and happen.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, I mean, obviously, we were just talking prior to the call, right? You have two sons who are playing, club travel baseball. Every kid now who plays club or travel baseball and softball are just playing a ton. And do you think that there's a residual effect of them playing, say they start club ball like 10, 11, 12 years old, they play all the way, and if they're lucky enough, they play at a high level, college, and maybe in the pros. Do you think that all those long-term effects are hitting them later in life, say if they're in college or in the pros? Do you think those are any of the reasons why some of these injuries are occurring?
Yeah, I mean, because you have adaptations, right? You're going to have bony adaptations, muscular adaptations to that stress that's on it. Eric Cressy kind of talks about all the time of like, hey, here's the bony adaptations that we get around the guy that's been throwing X amount of innings over X period of times. And yeah, that definitely contributes to it over the long haul. I think that the big thing with the kids to help stave that off is, again, going back to, hey, if you're a high-level baseball player, make sure they're doing something else in the off season, right? Like at a young age, they shouldn't be playing, starting, if they're a high-level player, they're playing travel ball. So they're starting in January, right? And then they're going from their January schedule right into a competitive season, whether that's Little League or travel or both. That goes into, if they're good and they're playing travel, they're going into at least June. And then if they're also pretty good, they're making the Little League All-Star team, and now they're going into at least mid to late July. And then sometimes they'll go and play fall ball. Like that's just a tremendous amount of stress. It's so important at that age, at that younger age, like, dude, stop in like August, at the latest, go play another sport, go play golf, football, soccer, go do something else, put that ball down and really go out and do it. It's like the best way to get guys healthy. The guys that I see that run into the most problems are at an early age, 11, 12, they've already kind of stopped the other sports and now they're just a singular sport athlete. And, we've just seen over and over again, like, those single sport athletes, the injury rates are sky high, and yeah, you can use our, again, that's where Parisi comes in, the strength and conditioning, the sports performance training helps out because it's almost a secondary sport, but still it's just good for them, I think, to kind of, do more of a classical sport to kind of help them stave off those injuries more long-term. As you get older, like once they become like, junior, senior, if you're really kind of realizing this is our pathway, to like you go into the next level and playing in college or beyond, and you want to specialize. Okay. I can, there's good argument for doing that. But again, you still have to have, you got to have that strength and conditioning background or foundational work to help stave off those injuries and ultimately give you higher levels of performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point about the strength conditioning becoming their other sport. I mean, listen, I think the days of the 3-sport athlete are probably gone. I mean, I was a 3-sport athlete. I played 3 sports my whole high school career. But I still think kids can play 2 sports. Like you said, they could play soccer in the fall and baseball in the spring and summer. Because, I mean, if you look at it, they're playing 9 months out of the year sometimes.
And it's impossible. Like, just looking at this year, you make that point. Like, to actually be a 3-sport athlete it's so hard because not only are you just playing the sport in season, like during soccer season, you play soccer. During basketball season, you play basketball. During baseball season, you play baseball. In the summertime, all 3 of those sports want you to do their program in the summertime too. Right. And they all have some sort of carryover travel. And it's like, it's impossible. I mean, it's a lot of work to be able to do the 3-sport, even the 2-sport thing, in this day and age.
It's difficult. And it's just trying to find the right balance. That's all I tell, you probably do the same thing. You have a couple drinks with parents and kids, and that's what you talk about. Hey, what are your kids doing? What are they up to? And I'm sure you get hit up. I get hit up with a ton of questions all the time. What should I be doing with my kid? And sometimes it's unpopular what I say because I tell them the rest. Take them out for ice cream.
Yeah.
Take a break. And if you don't know, they got to do more. They got to do more. And I appreciate that because, listen, I'm the same way. You have to be focused. You have to put the time in. You have to have a plan. But I'll give you an example. Like my daughter, have her on a little bit of a plan this summer. She ran track and we shut her down. I think I had to do a couple more meets, but she was shut down by early July. So that's it. You're done. Because she's been running since February. And doing some workouts. And the group that we were working out with, a lot of kids are on vacation this week. So I said, you know what? Just go for a run today. She's like, well, what should I do? I go, I don't know. Go for a run. Figure it out. Do what feels good. And she just looked at it. Because they're so used to it is a structured, exact, set rep. And I think part of what kids need a little more of now is they need a little freedom. Not that we want to give them everything, but I think once in a while, let them have a say in what they do. And sometimes they'll kind of just pick something fun to do. And if they move a little, I don't think it's a bad thing once in a while. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I know kids are on programs, but do you ever do things like that in the middle of your workouts? Like let them just kind of, maybe play dodgeball or something like that to kind of just change things up?
Oh yeah. We'll have guys throw a football. We'll have guys do different things in here just to, again, kind of mix it up a little bit. The other thing we do too is like, I'm not afraid to, like, kid just finished, got a bunch of guys they're wrapping up their baseball season, their travel season, showcase seasons right now. And I'll tell them like, hey, listen, I don't want to see you inside my facility till September. I want you to go out and be a kid. Go get away from the stress. Go to the beach, go to the amusement park, go hang out with your parents, go be with your friends and let some of that stress leave your body. And then we'll come back here and go and get after it. And I think I know a lot of them appreciate that, because then when they come back in, they're ready to go get after it, versus like, I gotta continue on with the grind, and again, you're trying to not just, grind that body down, but also not, beat them down mentally where they begin to kind of push that element of like, man, I'm getting burnt out of the sport. Because you can get into that real fast as well. And you nailed it on the head. Like, hey, just if you feel like you need to go exercise, just go for a run, go do something. It doesn't just go free play. That's okay.
Yeah. Cause I think, listen, you and I are very similar. We've worked on projects together doing some baseball programs and, we're both very detail oriented, but I think there needs to be a flip side of that. Cause I think kids are so detail oriented between going to school and college prep and SATs and AP classes. I mean, they don't have that like freedom type thing. I think they need a little bit more of that. And I think more for their mental state, and again, look what's going on in sports now. Mental health is becoming much more to the forefront. And I think you and I have probably dealt with this on a daily basis, working with kids who, you can tell they're shot mentally. They're just done from everything going on. And I've had kids tell me, I don't want to play anymore. Like they're just done. And they want to talk to the parents. And I'm like, I don't know if that's my job, but it happens. You know, it definitely happens
all the time. Yeah, and especially actually more so this year. I just see it. We can get away. I'll get away from that. I don't want to go down that road. But yeah.
It's a whacked year. I mean, I think it's, you know, I feel good. I think the springtime, I think for most kids was normal is not the right word, but as close to normal as it could have been. A couple little things here and there, but whatever. I think the kids are fine. But, you know, moving forward, how do you see strength conditioning moving forward? Especially, you know, we're definitely talking about baseball and softball. How do you see it moving forward? Because the exit velo off the bat and the velo on the gun are number one for every parent. And I'll follow that up as well. Where do you think kids need to start? Because you mentioned it earlier. Kids, a 14-year-old may walk in your facility, going to be a freshman next year. Kids throwing, I don't know, 75 miles an hour. You know, mom and dad want them to throw 90. Where do you start with them? Because you know they want to be on the rocket throwing program, or whatever, you know, whatever you guys call it. What do you do, and how do you kind of get them going?
So how I get it, I mean, we start with a pretty comprehensive evaluation. And I'll answer that question a couple different ways, but we start with a comprehensive evaluation. So I'll talk to them about, like, what have you done for training? You know, when's the last time you trained for 3 days a week for 3 months or more? We'll go into, like, the big thing is, like, nutrition. What are you eating? You know, I'll go into injury history, talk about that. But then we establish, like, 3 or 4 specific goals. And for most of these guys that and gals I get, like, body weight's a big one, right? They're all skinny. They're all underweight. And I tell them, like, hey, listen, if your goal is to play at the next level, right? Velo's one thing, but you know what? You know, 5'9", 5'10", $140 to $160 pounds is a dime a dozen in New England, right? Any coach can find any of that. Like, if you want to really stand out, you know, as a showcase player and reach the next level, your velo and exit velo may take you one place, but what really stands out is, like, those bigger, stronger kids. Because those bigger, stronger kids are usually hitting the ball a lot further, and they're also throwing the ball a lot harder. So we really kind of hone in on, like, you know, being able to optimize body weight. And I think that's an important factor. Again, I don't have any, it's all, like, just my own experience, but I think you have to accumulate some mass in your body to be able to accept those loads, right? Again, you can't lift, like, bigger weights unless you've got mass behind you. Doesn't mean I need everybody to look like a power lifter, but we want to get you around your optimal body weight. You know, and a lot of guys, it's taking them from 140 pounds to 170, 175 because, you know, that's about where you should sit. So my take-home message during that eval is, like, we got to get you here. So again, it goes back to our principle of, you got to have that right foundation, you know, and it begins with having a great base of strength, so that you can accept those forces and deliver those forces on the mound or you know, at the plate. And, you know, if you're strong, then you're going to be more resistant to injury, right? And if you're stronger, you're going to be faster. You know, your 60-yard dash time is going to go down. You're going to be able to accept forces, like, on the field and being able to change direction. So that's really where I see it. A lot of it is just beginning to get a good eval, but then, hey, start to hit home with that nutrition and say, this is your underlying foundation. This is what we want to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, listen, we say it all the time. You know, there needs to be a base level of strength, and I think everyone knows that. But just to dive in a little deeper, let's do a scenario, because we have a lot of coaches get on this call.
Yeah.
The kid comes in September. We'll say, okay, it's new year, new me, right? The kid's going to come in and start training. And, you know, they want to make, we'll say they want to make the varsity baseball team. They're a freshman or a sophomore. They come to meet with you in September. They're going to train with you from September to March. What type of plan would you put them on? Just, you don't have to give me sets and reps, but just kind of what type of little, like, microcycles would you do with them? And then also, too, how would you advise them to incorporate, if they're doing a throwing program and getting pitching lessons, how would you advise them to layer that into that program?
So we're a little different and lucky in the fact that I'm comprehensive here. So my facility is big enough where I actually have the ability to throw inside my facility. So, but to go back to your question is, so again, it comes down to evaluation. September, October, I'm just taking a look at what's the stress that's been put on the body. Usually during that time period, it's a lot of time spent on mobility, flexibility, soft tissue, like really restoring all that tissue to and getting them so they're not so beaten up, and also so they're loose and begin to kind of accept load and, kind of taking away those red flags that could lead to injury. For a lot of guys, usually if it's their first time with me, I'm checking shoulder total motion. I want to get them. Science tells us that I want my throwing side to be within 9 degrees of my non-throwing side. A lot of guys will come in 20, 30 degrees off. Wow. So it's imperative that I kind of restore that before we begin anything. So it's things like that we're looking for the eval where, okay, the biggest areas, hey, let's get them loose. Let's get them mobile. Let's get them ready to do some work, set in some baseline strength areas. Then once we start to get November, December, now I'm starting to hey, we're going to really start getting after some strength and power. Come January, now we're also, the other thing too, in November, December, I'm really starting to work on more arm care. So kind of really setting in the baseline of their shoulder program, the rotator cuff program. January, February, March, now I've actually beginning to incorporate their long toss program. For the most part, they're doing it inside here with me. If they've got a pitching coach or something like that, most of them I know in the area, I'll either connect with them or at least I'll get an idea of what their throwing schedule is. Hey, if you're throwing off the mound with this coach, I don't necessarily recommend you be doing that in January, but if at least I'll have an idea of what they're doing and build their workouts kind of around that. But January, February, we're, again, just pushing that strength and power. Come March, now I'm just making sure everything's kind of fine-tuned, right? We'll back off on volume some, right? Probably include a little bit more mobility work as part of our supersets. So now come April, and the other thing, just pushing the conditioning level, making sure that their conditioning base is underneath them so that, hey, they got the capacity to go out there and do work. So now come April, when they're ready to go hit the field and go hit pitchers and catchers, they're ready to just start go and get after it, and they're flying. And so that's kind of how we set things up a little bit.
How many days a week do you normally see them? 3, 4?
So minimum number of days of training with us is 3. Guys and girls that are kind of in their junior and senior year, if they have the availability, I'll push 4, right? But for me, 3 is the minimum. You have a really difficult getting results 1 to 2 days a week. So here we don't do it. But for the norm for us is 3 or 4 days a week. And then the splits of that, again, kind of really depend on the athlete and what their needs are. It's hard to say. I don't necessarily follow an upper lower body split or push pull. It really depends on what that person's needs are, dictates what they're doing on those specific days.
No, that's great. I mean, and are you working with any softball players as well, or is it mostly baseball?
So it's I'd say we're probably it's primarily baseball, but I do have a fair amount of softball players too. And don't get me wrong, my niche is baseball, softball, but we have plenty of other athletes too. I got plenty of swimmers, I got plenty of basketball players, bunch of hockey players. This is just how we kind of handle that baseball, softball route. But the softball girls are the same. A lot of them, the big take-home message with them is strength. Strength is going to carry you so much further with your peers because most girls don't strength train, right? And it's going to set you apart. Softball inherently, it leads to some bigger girls tend to play that. And I just tell them hey, listen, you're already a little bit bigger. You're already going to be a little bit stronger. Hey, let's really top off your strength. Let's teach you how to move a little bit better, on the field, get your foot speed up, so that you can play some different positions. And again, that's going to give you advantage over everybody else.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, I was saying, I know I'm beating you up with the baseball, softball stuff, but what, the last question I'm going to ask you, how do you work with softball pitchers versus baseball pitchers? Obviously the motion is different. Is there anything different that you do? I would assume lower body work is huge, but what are you doing around the shoulder complex for them? Is there anything different that you do with them as opposed to a baseball pitcher?
I treat them the same.
You do? Okay.
And really, even the pitchers and the position players for baseball, you're still doing loads of arm care with it. And they all kind of fall in the same category for me. To me, there's no harm being done by adding that work, as part of their program, so, again, there's less stress that goes on with the shoulder complex with softball pitchers. But overall, once they're not playing softball, they're playing somewhere else on the field. And I want to make sure that arm care is taking place. The other big thing that we do, believe it or not, is with softball players, a lot of them don't have that understanding of how to, really how to create rotational force, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of them will just, when they throw, it's all arm. And you got to teach them like, hey, here's how to, put the weight on the inside ball of your foot, drive through your foot, create that triple extension, and rotate through the hip in order to create the power for throwing. Because a lot of them really don't have that understanding of how to do that. It's just, hey, I'm just gonna, drop my elbow a little bit and push that ball, versus, hey, coming over the top, pushing off of that backside and generating the force through your hip, and then just allowing that arm to be the whip to carry it through. So for softball players, that's a big win if you can get them to do that, because it's, again, not only are they going to have more performance on the field, but you're going to stave off those shoulder problems.
Oh, that's good. It's interesting. I didn't know if there's anything different with the pitchers, but I agree. I mean, I think it doesn't matter if you're a pitcher or a throwing athlete, right? It's all pretty much the same, except for obviously if you're a pitcher in softball or baseball. But I promise you no more baseball questions. But
oh no, I know I'll talk baseball all day long.
I know you can. That's why I brought it up. But I think people in our network need to know that, not to bust your phones down, but people need to know we have you in our network. I know if I have any baseball questions, I'm looking to what you and I did years ago when we put some stuff together, and then
right.
I would still recommend you, because you're knee deep in it all the time. And I think that's what people have to understand is if you know someone that's in, whatever they're working, if it's baseball, softball, football, whatever, use them as a resource, because I can't train every sport well. Like my youngest daughter just started swimming. I don't know anything about swimming, and she's asking me, Dad, what should I do? She's 11 years old. I'm like, I'm going to go online and look up some of the programs that we did, because I don't fully understand it. I understand training, but I think I want people to know, how important you are to our network, and the fact that you're back now. That's kind of the reason why I wanted to do this call, but we started talking baseball and I got excited.
Right.
Wanted to talk about, obviously you were working for an orthopedic group for 8 to 10 years. Things changed. You started your own company. You were working, I think you were renting space. Was that at a baseball school somewhere?
No. So I started off, I literally, once I made that decision of like, I'm going to do the sports performance thing, I've always also been really good from the pitching side. So I took that stuff I learned from when I was in professional baseball. And one of the things I learned, right, and it still happens to this day, is like if the pitcher gets hurt, it's not the pitcher's fault, right? It's a trainer's fault.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter how he throws. It's always a trainer's fault because I didn't make him do his shoulder program. So I really did a deep dive into understanding pitching mechanics. And I continue that to this day because it just fascinates me with, how the body moves and how people kind of create velocity and force. So when I started back up, I was renting space out of this small personal 2,500 square foot personal training studio with, 4 other personal trainers. And then on the side, I was doing like some pitching lesson stuff, some mini camps. And, from the sports performance side, I'm telling you, like I had like 1 or 2 clients, that's it. But I gradually just started to kind of, you get your reputation out there. I just, I worked with 1 or 2, and then I got 1 athlete, which led to another one, which led to another one. And then, the big thing that really helped me take off was I did the classic, like, hey, old school Parisi camps, speed camps. I ran like 5 of those, in the summertime, ran 5 of those. And again, the more you just start to put your face out there, the more people begin to recognize you and see you. And got a couple athletes off that. And next thing you know, that the program just built. And I grew exponentially during COVID. So much so that like during COVID, I was like frantically trying to find another space because, I had, 30 to 35 somewhat athletes, and I'm sharing this space with 4 other trainers. And it was a big issue to do that. And luckily we were able to kind of, in September of this past year, I was able to move into, the 10,000 square foot facility that I used to be in, and be able to grow.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. I mean, right after I left, they closed within 3 months, and then it sat vacant.
Oh, so the whole building was vacant.
This whole building wasn't vacant, but the performance space was. Yeah. So just so everybody has an understanding, like inside, I'm in a 150,000 square foot building. In here, there's an orthopedic group in here. There's a physical therapy group in here that were part of the orthopedic group that I was part of. But right smack dab in the middle of it is a 10,000 square foot space that's got a 4-lane, 50-yard track, 30 yards of turf field, and a weight training area. So that whole area was vacant, and I just was able to kind of move into it. But, in terms of just being able to grow, I think it's not magic. It was just applying the basic principles that I learned when I was part of the Parisi network. It's like, you've got to get your name out there. You got to do some free stuff. You got to do some demos. You got to do some camps, and, and just get in front of people. And that's literally, how I did it and how I got it back to where I am today. It was just applying that same methodology, Yeah. There you go.
Well, I think it's cool because, obviously, the space opened up, and sometimes when chaos happens, there's opportunity, and, you seize an opportunity. Number one, get a bigger space, and it's in a way ironic, right? You go back to the old space that you're in, which is a great space. And it was your program, right? It was Skolfield Performance, right? That's what it was called. But then I think it was in the winter or spring, you came back on board with us. So maybe take us through that process, kind of, bringing it back old school.
Yeah. And I always knew, like, I wanted to get back into the network, and, we got going, and, one of the other big things is, as you grow, you've got to hire people. Right. And part of that whole thing is, like, you've got to be able to train your staff up. And one of the things I always loved was the fact that the onboarding process, as it relates to kind of Parisi and everything, is outstanding, because it's not only teaching you, like, hey, here's the history of the Parisi, here's the vision, here's the mission statement, here's how to train acceleration, top speed, change of direction. All that stuff is great, but there's also the other element of, like, teaching people how to be good coaches, and that system of how to do things, I just thought was phenomenal. I'm like, I want to get back to that educational platform, and being able to put my staff in front of it. It was like key to me. So, we began to kind of engage in conversations, Bill and I, about, like, hey, here's what makes sense. My model's a little bit different, so I don't run it necessarily in the same classical sense as how, like, some other programs do. Because we're private session and semi-private session only, along with summer camps. But the methodology and the educational platform around it, to me, and what it's become compared to, like, what it was, is really second to none. There's so much great content on there that is invaluable. So it really helps me onboard new staff and continue to kind of provide, because one of the things we do here is weekly staff development. So every Wednesday we have our staff meeting, and right after that is an hour of staff development. And I utilize a lot of the stuff that's inside the educational platform to deliver content to my staff. So that's how we kind of got back on board and back involved. And I'd like to have more involvement, and it's just a matter of like getting a little bit more free time.
Yeah, that is fine. Well, listen, I know I want you around. I mean, we want your brain involved in us, definitely from the baseball standpoint, but even just your overall experience is amazing. And I think a lot of owners have probably done what you've done. Maybe they were somewhere, they changed, they left, whatever happened, and then they started out as an independent, renting space, driving around, renting fields, whatever, and then you got into a bigger space because you grew your business, and now you got re-involved in us. I think a lot of people would get a lot out of that, because some people think they could do it on their own, and I think all of us are proud people, and we want to work hard, but sometimes it's okay to get a little bit of help, and it takes a lot of stuff off your plate. Like, you don't have to, not that you don't have to think, but hey, if I got a new staff coming on, I have a program I can give them that they can go do, and then come to me, and then I can kind of refine them a little. It's probably what you're doing.
Exactly. And then, you just nailed it on the head. Like, that goes back to the original reason why I looked into Parisi, 12 years ago was because when you start a business, you need mentors, you need people that you can go talk to, and you have this, here I had like this whole network of people that I could talk, not only training with, but talk business with. What do you run for specials? How are you doing your marketing? What do you do when you run into this? Like, I've always said this, like the network is so critical, like being able to be part of a network and using people, not being afraid to talk to, like the number of times you and I talked, or I talked to Eric, or I talked to Cirillo or Casey or Ginger and Bill. And like, it's so valuable just to have somebody where you can pick up the phone and, begin asking questions. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. If you're having trouble, like as an owner, or you got a problem, or even as a coach, like get on the Facebook groups or pick up the phone and utilize this network. Cause there's a lot of other, you don't get that when you're just the independent, gym down the street or independent sports performance place down the street. Like they don't have that resource to tap into. So, my big take home message is, utilize the network.
I think that's probably the best way to kind of end this, but Stan and I can definitely talk more. We're going to get you on again, but I think what I've gotten out of this call is we need to get Stan back involved and help us with our baseball and softball programming. And, we definitely want you around. I'm excited that you're back and that we're finally re-engaged. It's been a while since we've talked. But if people want to get in touch with you or follow you or check out what you're doing, where should they get you? Because now we got a lot of places, handles and emails, and what's the best way to get you?
Just go to, follow our story on Skolfield_sports on Instagram. That's probably the best place. My website is really designed more along the lines of kind of capture business, but our Instagram story kind of gives you, hey, here's a day in the life of what we do. And otherwise, like, hey, I'll see everybody at the summit. Let's go. I
know it's hopefully, right. It's coming up. Hopefully everything stays normal. I pray everything's going to be okay.
That's right.
It's a good weekend. We missed it last year, and if anything, the summit's my favorite part of the year. We get to hang out, talk shop, and
mine too.
Share what we do. And sometimes I think what happens is people don't understand. You forget you do this every day, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. You think like you're the only one going through these things, and then you get together with 100 other people, and everybody's going through the same thing.
Right.
You're like, okay, it's not just me. And it's a good time, I think, to kick your feet up and have a beer once in a while and relax.
You got to go to that. I'll say it again. It's exactly that. It's just being able to kind of connect with everybody, talk to owners, meet new people who you can bounce things off of. And you know what? You actually learn some stuff. You got the guru himself speaking about speed. Yeah. So
I just found out. I didn't know until I read
it. Awesome.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I mean, listen, for me, it's funny. If you look at, I was doing some stuff with you, and I had my hands in it, but I've really taken the biomechanics of speed is real. I've kind of dove deep into because I just fell in love with it. Now I'm coaching track, and it's all kind of worked out that way. So I think, you made a great point. I want to leave people with it. You found a niche that you love, but you dove in deep, and that's why you're so successful at it. And you're still learning. I'm sure if I polled you right now, you'd say you probably got a ton more to learn, even though you've probably forgotten more than I know. So when it comes to baseball,
got to be a student of the game.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Exactly. All right. Last question. Prediction for the Red Sox. What are they going to do?
My guess is they will go to American League Championship. I don't know if they have what it takes to win the whole thing. That's my prediction.
We'll say I'll come back and help you.
Dude, I just saw him pitch. Last week. Dealing 97, 98 miles an hour. He did get lit up on Sunday, but hey, I'll take my chances.
If you have him, you got a shot.
Yeah. That's true. So San Fran looks pretty tough. There's, Tampa Bay is still going to be, to hold them off is going to be pretty tough, but that's my call.
Get the White Sox are asleep. We'll see if they pull off a move in this trade deadline next day or so. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right. Well, Stan, thank you so much for getting on. I'm sure the whole network appreciates it. And, when you see him at the summit, go bug him a little bit.
Yep. Please do. Introduce yourself. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Thank you.